Hi guys, welcome to part 2 of my 31 Days of Halloween Marathon recap. Today, as you can tell from the title, and if you've watched my last recap video, I am recapping films 31 to 60 in my marathon. This may sound like a lot of movies to some people. I'm actually behind how many I had watched at this point last year, so that makes me a tad concerned that I'm not going to reach my goal, which is 206. Every year I challenge myself to watch as many movies as I can in 31 days. Last year I watched 205 and I actually managed to do that in 30 days. So this year I just have to watch 206, but I've been falling way behind because I've had various other responsibilities pulling me away from movies, and that's kind of frustrating me. But nevertheless, I am still watching movies, so I have another recap for you. So, time for me to dive in and give you my thoughts on these 31 to 60 films that I have watched. At number 31 is Chopping Mall, also known as Killbots, a 1986 science fiction comedy horror film directed by Jim Wynorski and written by Wynorski and Stephen Mitchell. The story focuses on 3 security robots going bananas and killing teenage employees inside a shopping mall after dark. I can see why this has a cult following. It's typical 80s dumb fun, killer robots, creative kills, all equals a good time really. Only downside is the unfortunate 80s staple of boobs, sex and orgies. I would have preferred less of that and more killer robots, hell, more victims even, but alas, it was the 80s and it's hard to have an 80s horror film that doesn't have sex or boobs. It's so pointless and takes away from perfectly good robot massacre time, which is what I signed up for. Number 32 is Cocoon, a 1985 American science fiction comedy drama film directed by Ron Howard with a screenplay by Tom Benedict from a story by David Saperstein. When a group of trespassing seniors swim in a pool containing alien cocoons, they find themselves energized with youthful vigor. I spent 2 hours crying over this film. It's sweet and touching and sad and beautiful. It's just an overall awesome film and not at all what I was expecting. All these years, the way people described it, I thought it was about elderly people who find a way to drain the young of their life force. It's not that at all. Had people said the film involved Atlantis, one of my favorite things on the planet, I'd have watched this years ago. It's fun, but also has some great lessons about only being as old as you feel and letting time pass you by and not appreciating the things that really matter. Also reminds us how unappreciated and ignored the elderly are by society. All these people were of sound mind, just wanting a better life, and people were trying to stop them because once you become old, you somehow lose your rights to live how you choose or die or not die as you choose, and your dignity gets lost too. This isn't just about finding the fountain of youth, it's about finding a place where what you have to offer is of value and appreciated, where you don't have to live with the fear of death looming over you, where you get to live instead of already being treated as if you're dead. Number 33, Cocoon The Return, a 1988 American science fiction comedy drama film directed by Daniel Petrie and written by Stephen McPherson. It's the sequel to the 1985 film Cocoon, and in it the old age pensioners that left at the end of the first film come back to Earth to visit their relatives. Will they all decide to go back to the planet where no one grows old, or will they be tempted to stay back on Earth? So much crying, so much crying. This is another case where I do not agree with the critics of the time. I think it's equally as poignant and emotional as the first one. While the first film was touching on embracing the benefits of youth, this one touches on the benefits of age, the things we get to experience and appreciate that come with getting old, but also some of the trouble, how to start over at an old age and depression that so many of the elderly suffer with and go untreated. My eyes were killing me after this one. So many of our characters have learned lessons of life and many are choosing to start fresh, a brave thing for anyone to do, but it also deals with self-sacrifice. I don't know how anyone could hate this, plus it was amazing to see the original cast all return for this film and the inclusion of Elaine Stritch. Number 34, The Comedy of Terrors, a 1963 American International Pictures horror comedy film directed by Jacques Tourneur and written by Richard Matheson. In it, a dishonest undertaker, Waldo Trumbull, and his sidekick, Felix Gilly, are creating their own customers when they cannot find willing ones. This was exactly what I needed after all the crying from the Cocoon movies. A 60s horror comedy film starring Vincent Price and Boris Karloff. What more could I have possibly asked for? It's macabre as all get out and hilarious as hell to boot. Absolutely adored this piece. As unscrupulous as the main characters are, it just makes them all the more entertaining to watch. I have to find this on DVD and watch it over and over. A lot about this, including the end credits, reminded me of Dracula Dead and Loving It, and makes me think that movie was inspired by this one. Either way, I loved it. Number 35, The Cottage, a 2008 British dark comic horror movie written and directed by Paul Andrew Williams. In a remote part of the countryside, a bungled kidnapping turns into a living nightmare for four central characters when they cross paths with a psychopathic farmer and all hell breaks loose. Well, this was another pleasant surprise. Bumbling criminals, hitmen, mutant monster serial killers, this film has it all. On top of that, it's positively hilarious. The humour is in keeping with films like Hot Fuzz, but the way it's all scripted and structured, there is an amazing flow to this where it just naturally leads into each moment. It's got all the elements for a good crime or horror film, but well-written comedy that balances everything out. Can't believe I never heard of this film or seen anyone talk about it, especially since it stars Andy Serkis. Number 36, Creature from the Black Lagoon, a 1954 black and white 3D monster horror film directed by Jack Arnold with a screenplay by Harry Essex and Arthur Ross from a story by Maurice Zim. In it, a strange prehistoric beast lurks in the depths of the Amazonian jungle. A group of scientists try to capture the animal and bring it back to civilization for study. I finally understand the praise of this film. It's absolutely amazing, and even more so when you factor in the time period. For a black and white film, there is an incredible use of lighting, the costume for Gilman is incredible, the stunt work is of a high caliber I was not expecting, and the score is phenomenal. You can see so much of the influence in later films generated by this film. No, I'm not just talking about Shape of Water, but even the way they film the female lead swimming from underneath her, representing the creature watching her from the depths, is a technique later used by Steven Spielberg in Jaws. I had no idea I would love this film so much, but I did. On top of that, it was a great story about how humans suck. Humans came into this creature's natural habitat where he wasn't bothering anyone for thousands of years. They came to capture it and study it, and all it does is fight back and try to defend itself, yet it's declared the monster. Why? It was minding its own business till white scientists came along. He only attacked after they came at him with harpoons, and okay, maybe he took a fancy to a young lady, but he's a lonely creature clearly thinking about continuing the species, so he's running on preservation instincts. Number 37, Revenge of the Creature, aka Return of the Creature and Return of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, a 1955 black and white 3D monster horror film directed by Jack Arnold with a screenplay and story by William Allen. It's the sequel to 1954's Creature from the Black Lagoon, and in it, men capture the creature from the Black Lagoon and make him an aquarium attraction from which he escapes. It follows a lot of the same elements of the first film, only it really focuses more on treating the creature as a SeaWorld attraction. He's attacked in his own habitat for just existing, removed from his natural environment, and then placed in a tank where he's chained up and forced to be an aquarium attraction. On top of that, he's being tortured all the time in order to be conditioned and learn tricks like a circus animal. It's hard to ever view the creature as evil. He's not evil, he's alone and in a strange place. He doesn't understand why people are hurting him. Wouldn't you be hostile? I think these films are the perfect depiction of the mistreatment the world gives to those that are declared different, and a great demonstration of how we treat animals in supposed sanctuaries. We take animals out of their homes and put them on display for profit. The monsters of these stories are the scientists. It's possible to observe something and study it without hurting it. Also, we're stunned to see a young Clint Eastwood make an appearance in this. Number 38, The Creature Walks Among Us, a 1956 American monster horror film directed by John Sherwood in his directorial debut and written by Arthur A. Ross. It's the third and final installment in the Creature from the Black Lagoon series and a sequel to 1955's Revenge of the Creature. This one just makes you hate humans even more than the previous two. Hunt down a creature, attack it, then perform experiments on it and turn it into something closer to human because that just works better for you. This film has Frankenstein vibes. I mean, crazy doctor creates creature, then is the cause of creature going on rampage, and creature goes off to die because its creator turned on him. Very very Frankenstein. I didn't like this one as much. The domestic violence angle isn't necessary. Also, I'm so confused. The creature dies at the end of each film, yet in each film it's the last of its kind. So either it's dying and the writers don't care, we only think it died, or it's the last of its kind. Someone please tell me. Number 39, Cupid, a 2020 horror film directed and written by Scott Jeffrey. In it, after being horrendously embarrassed by the mean girls at school, Faye, a practicing witch, summons the evil Cupid to take revenge on all those who wronged her. I commend the film for taking such an interesting story and turning it into a horror film. While the execution is a bit off, and this really is a story about getting revenge on school bullies who, trust me, in this case deserved a slow, painful death, I'm still impressed by the concept. They took Roman mythology and the character of Cupid, not the idea of Cupid, but the character, and then took the story of Cupid and Psyche and made it the mythological story for this film. It's quite ingenious and shows creativity. To create a reason for why Cupid is evil, they did change the story of Cupid and Psyche and gave it a tragic ending instead of a happy one, but for the most part, up until that moment, it was almost dead on with the ancient tale. I think for an independent film, this shows chops and initiative. I think the acting for the project it was quite impressive, and it had some pretty unique skills. Where it was lacking was focusing far too much on the school drama and less on this rich Cupid story they created, and it gave far too much screen time and dialogue to the bully of the piece, where even right before her death, she is still a pain in the ass for the entire film, and the ending was anticlimactic. And sadly, the costume design for Cupid and Death, well, they weren't great, and definitely were very costumey. But for an indie film, you do what you can. It doesn't have rewatchability, and any scene with the teen characters made me want to go hang myself, but I was generous and gave this 3 out of 5 for going for an original and creative concept. We don't see that too often in horror these days. Number 40, Curse of the Nun, a 2018 horror film written and directed by Aaron Mertz. In it, a damaged young woman is looking forward to moving to a beautiful new home when the spirit of a deranged nun wants her to stay right where she is. Okay, I'll start with the positives. The actors are all terrific and give terrific performances. I especially enjoyed Brad Belemgian. He was kind of the comedic relief, but it felt rather organic, so I liked it. The location, set, and filming were great, and it was great cinematography. The only con really is the script. It is all over the shop. It doesn't have just one reveal, it has several, and it has several endings. Every time you think it's over, there's more of this film to go. The visions or hallucinations made it near impossible to follow the story or sequence of events and just left me confused. I was constantly bouncing between liking it and loathing it and never getting relief. The house is haunted by a nun who killed herself and thinks protecting the house will redeem her in the eyes of God, but she only feels the need to protect the house from people who are moving out of it. And only then does she appear, and she appears because she doesn't want the people to leave, and if you try to leave, she will kill them, and she can control space and time, and she acts like a human. She checks your pulse to see if you're dead, she chases you, she runs, she uses the stairs. You can trick her by running in a different direction. She fixes her habit when it gets in the way, and she had the need of a weapon, even though, again, she can control space and time. I don't know how to make heads or tails of that story. It was just all over the place. At one point, the lead, Anna, played by Lacey Hartzell, gets stabbed with a crucifix in her left shoulder. We watch her pull it out, cover it, then it cuts to her sitting down, and suddenly the wound is on her right shoulder and is for the rest of the film. Really? You forgot which arm you filmed getting stabbed? Jeez Louise. And yes, it made me jump once, but it only got me because I assumed nothing interesting would gonna happen. Number 41, Daniel Isn't Real, a 2019 American psychological horror film directed by Adam Egypt Mortimer with a screenplay by Mortimer and Brian DeLeo based on the novel In This Way I Was Saved by DeLeo. In it, a troubled college freshman, Luke, suffers a violent family trauma. He then resurrects his charismatic childhood imaginary friend Daniel to help him cope, not realizing how dangerous Daniel is. You could dedicate an entire week to breaking down the many themes in this film. It's a very heavy psychological horror film that feels like a more palatable mix of Mandy and The Endless, but with greatly different plot subjects. This film addresses mental illness, with that being the predominant storyline, and it even addresses toxic masculinity. This film really keeps you guessing up until the very end. Is Luke crazy, or is Daniel a demon from another world? I'm not sure how I feel about how it ends and the answers we are given, but I can't deny it's one hell of a journey and really keeps you on your toes and sucks you into a messed up series of events. A friend described this as evil drop dead Fred, and for that, at least for the first half, that is 100% what it is. Even down to the locking Daniel away and him returning when Luke is an adult. Maybe that's why I was able to enjoy it, because of the darker parallels to one of my all-time favorite films. Incredible performances by Miles Robbins and Patrick Schwarzenegger. Number 42, The Dawn, a 2019 American horror thriller film directed by Brandon Slagle and written by Slagle and Elliot Divney. Following the murder of her family at the hands of her father in the wake of World War I, a young woman goes to live in a convent. However, the demons that plagued her father follow, reawakening the nightmares of her past. Did I enjoy this film? No, not really. However, this film is a fresh take on possession films. It doesn't outright appear to be one until a fair way into the film, and when you realize it is, you then also realize the reason you couldn't tell is because this is looking at possession in a different way. Instead of a film about a haunting followed by exorcism, it's a film about a possessed person and their inner battle, all of which are huge pluses, but that's not why I recommend this. That's just an added bonus. I 100% recommend this for the most unexpected plot twist I have ever seen in all my life, I think. The film comes to a conclusion and you go, oh, okay, I knew so-and-so was a baddie, but then you see something, an image, and I found myself going, hang on, I know this image. Is that what I think it is? If so, why on earth would it be in this film? And then the film ends with a written narration, which then gives you a whole different twist on this film you never saw coming because it never was addressed. But now the opening story starts to hold bigger meaning, and then a secondary twist. The film's title changes and we learn this is an unofficial prequel to a story from a certain set of other films that exist, and my mouth was hanging open and my arms were cheering, without pom-poms though. I was completely taken by surprise. I don't think I've ever seen a film reveal a real title at the end of the film, because it can't go by the title we discover, that would give it all away. But the reveal was so very worth it. I'd say go and watch this for that ending alone and try to see if you can guess what's coming. I've probably given too much away, but I'm trying to be as vague and cryptic as I can as to not ruin it. Number 43, The Dead Don't Die, a 2019 American ensemble zombie horror comedy film written and directed by Jim Jarmusch. It follows a small town's police force as they combat a sudden zombie invasion. Considering I most of the time can't stand zombie movies, this one I didn't mind. It's different and bizarre and doesn't follow too much of the same traditional zombie stuff, so it was easier for me to get into, but boy, is this the most stoner-esque zombie movie I have ever seen. I mean legit stoner, not those films that depict stoners as hyperactive, which is weird. I mean this entire film feels like it's moving at the same pace as a zombie. Everyone is in slow motion, the dialogue, the scenes, everything is drawn out, like despite a basic apocalypse everyone has all the time in the world. It was easy to watch, but the film felt never ending. Number 44, Dr. Sleep, a 2019 American supernatural horror film written and directed by Mike Flanagan, based on the 2013 novel of the same name by Stephen King. It's a direct sequel to the 1980 film The Shining, also adapted from King's 1977 novel of the same name. Years following the events of The Shining, a now adult Dan Torrance must protect a young girl with similar powers from a cult known as the True Knot, who prey on children with powers to remain immortal. I'm not remotely a fan of The Shining. I've watched it twice and disliked it both times. I've never understood the hype and love for that film, and I never will, so I was apprehensive going into this film. Add the fact it was written and directed by Mike Flanagan, and I was very nervous because outside of Hush, I just don't enjoy his work at all, but I forgot to factor in this isn't his creation. This technically comes from the mind of Stephen King, so there was hope, and to my surprise, I actually really enjoyed this. For a 2.5 hour film, it didn't feel too long or too short. It felt like it ran for the right amount of time. The performances are great, and it's a story I could wrap my head around, and there's a real journey for each character and the story itself. Surprised for sure, but I enjoyed this, and unlike The Shining, this I would watch again. Number 45, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, a 2010 horror film directed by Troy Nixey and written by Guillermo del Toro and Matthew Robbins, and is a remake of the 1973 made-for-television film of the same name. It follows a family moving into a 19th century Rhode Island mansion where the withdrawn daughter begins to witness malevolent creatures that emerge from a sealed ash pit in the basement of the house. You can definitely see the Del Toro influence in this film. I mean, the creatures and how they like eating teeth, they look and act very similar to the tooth fairies in Hellboy. The almost dark fairy tale elements feel like a resting place for Del Toro, but then the film feels very normal, very real world, which I would say is Robin's influence. I didn't feel the two came together very well. You had moments where you feel it's based in reality, then when you see the creature, it feels otherworldly, and the two didn't always feel like they came together well. That being said, Bailey Madison did a terrific job. This girl had some amazing screaming range at that age. It was impressive, and I like that Katie Holmes' character isn't the horror trope of the evil stepmother. She's actually very kind and loving and self-sacrificing and cares more for this young girl than her own parents do. I thought this was a lovely touch, and I have to admit the house is stunning. I loved it. Number 46, Dracula, a 1931 American pre-code supernatural horror film directed by Todd Browning and Carl Freund from a screenplay by Browning and Carl Laemmle Jr., based on the 1924 stage play Dracula by Hamilton Dean and John L. Balderston, adapted from the 1897 novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. The film sees Count Dracula, a vampire who immigrates from Transylvania to England and preys upon the blood of living victims, including a young man's fiancée. It's good to finally see this classic that I have seen referenced and spoofed my whole life yet never experienced for myself. I watched the original without the musical score and it was a trippy experience. We all mostly know how much a score can do for a film, but I don't think we fully appreciate it until we're watching a film that doesn't have a score at all. It's strange and unsettling and makes many scenes feel awkward, seeing as how they are filled with silence. That being said, I love seeing so many iconic lines and moments in action, definitely worth a revisit in the future. This is a classic for a very good reason, even if sometimes the story feels rushed and the ending feels abrupt. Number 47, Dracula's Daughter, a 1936 American vampire horror film directed by Lambert Hillier from a screenplay by Garrett Fort from a story by John L. Balderston. It tells the story of Countess Maria Zaleska, the daughter of Count Dracula and herself a vampire. Following Dracula's death, she believes that by destroying his body, she will be free of his influence and live normally. When this fails, she turns to a psychiatrist, Dr. Jeffrey Garth, for help. I actually really enjoyed this. I don't understand how Dracula has children, but I guess even dead he gets around. Doubt he's winning Father of the Year though. The film has a Sins of the Father type storyline going for it, and Maria's story is about trying to overcome the force of a dominant and controlling man in her life who, even in death, has hold over her, and what's sad is by the end, she still can't be free of it. It's pretty cool seeing an interesting story such as this and a female villain back in the 1930s. It's a struggle just finding one now, so it's even more impressive to have one back then, though I'm not sure why they renamed Van Helsing to Von Helsing. Number 48, Son of Dracula, a 1943 American horror film directed by Robert Siodmak with a screenplay by Eric Taylor from a story by Kurt Siodmak. It's the third Dracula film from the Universal Classic Monsters series and the sequel to 1936's Dracula's Daughter. When Catherine, a beautiful southern girl obsessed with thoughts of eternal life, invites Count Alucard to come to her mansion in the US, she unleashes a Pandora's box of horror on unsuspecting relatives and neighbors. This one didn't interest me anywhere near as much as the previous film or even the original. I know Lon Chaney is famous for playing so many iconic monster characters, but, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I think Lon Chaney might be my least favorite Dracula. Okay, third least favorite. The worst for me are Stephen Billington and Rutger Hauer. This story just didn't do anything for me, and I don't understand how Dracula has all these children. Are they children by blood or by bite? Also, this Dracula is pretty gullible. I mean, he technically got catfished by a pen pals. Yikes. Number 49, House of Dracula, a 1945 American monster crossover horror film directed by Earl C. Kenton with a screenplay by Edward T. Lowe from a story by Dwight V. Babcock and George Bricker. The Wolfman and Count Dracula beg Dr. Edelman to cure them of their killing instincts, but Dracula schemes to seduce the doctor's nurse. In terms of crossovers, this just didn't do it for me. Lon Chaney went from the Wolfman to Dracula, back to the Wolfman. Frankenstein's monster is placed in it, but he isn't really put to any use. Dracula wants a cure, but then he doesn't, and he's happy to just be a dick. Wolfman, I feel bad for. He genuinely wants a cure so badly because he hates his life and he's suicidal. Dr. Edelman ends up taking on a very Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of character, even though that's not who he is in this film. That's pretty much how it's written, so that was a turn to the story that was just a bit off-putting for me. Number 50, Eaten Alive, also known as Death Trap, Horror Hotel, and Starlight Slaughter, a 1976 American horror film directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Kim Henkel, Alvin L. Fast, and Marty Rustum. A psychotic hotel proprietor in rural East Texas feeds those who upset him to a large crocodile that lives in a swamp beside the hotel. I usually enjoy the work of Tobe Hooper, but this was the most annoying film I'd seen in my marathon so far. The character of Judd, in terms of personality, characterization, and behavior, is identical to Nuben Sawyer from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, only he's less effective because he's always at 100, and the incessant mumbling gets annoying. The film's aesthetic is also very similar to that of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to the point I thought maybe they had the same cinematographer. They don't. It takes place in a decrepit old building, much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well. Problem with the film is there's no narrative, there's no sense or logic to the story, there's no real plot. It's just a random location and random killings happening for no good reason. Why does this guy even own a scythe of that size? He doesn't exactly live near cornfields. This film opens, and within the first 11 minutes, I have to go through watching this poor girl nearly get raped twice by 2 different men. It was ridiculous. I now have more questions for Kill Bill Volume 1, since now I was surprised when I heard the opening line for Eaten Alive and went, hang on, I heard that in Kill Bill. Turned out it was in fact because Tarantino took it from this film, and I ask myself, why? Of all the lines in all the films, why on earth pick my name is Buck and I'm wearing the fuck? On top of no story, what annoyed me most was the never-ending screaming from every single character for the entire duration of the film. It's barely even like a stop or start thing. It's just constant screaming from everyone, and it was driving me batshit crazy to the point I'm screaming for them to shut up, which obviously they can't hear. That then made me notice that happens a lot in Tobe Hooper films. The female leads or any female characters just spend most of the film screaming and screaming and screaming. Did he just go to every actress during production and go, okay, now just keep screaming till filming is over? I bet they all suffered severe vocal cord issues from all that, because you know they didn't just do one take. Number 51, Echoes, a 2014 American supernatural horror film written and directed by Nils Timm. The story revolves around a young writer struggling with horrifying sleep paralysis-induced visions who retreats with her boyfriend to an isolated desert house. As the visions intensify, she finds herself on the verge of losing her mind or uncovering a life-threatening secret. This is another film that just didn't do it for me. It's a tad all over the place. She's possessed by a ghost because she has sleep paralysis. Okay, that part I get. But why does the ghost focus on her? Why does the ghost kill innocent people instead of, oh, I don't know, the person that actually killed her? She kills an innocent guy who was being threatened because he was nice, killed a shaman, played by a white guy by the way, but she does nothing to the guy who cheated on her and left her for dead in the desert. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. This film takes so many different avenues before finally deciding which one it wants to take, and when it's all revealed, it just feels anticlimactic, as does the ending, because it's such a non-ending that I don't get the point of it. Number 52, Elementary, translated to The Blacksmith, a 2017 international Basque language period dark fantasy horror film directed by Paul Urquijo Alijo and written by Alijo and Asier Gurkashbaria. I don't even know if I said that right. It's based on a Basque folk version of the tale of the Smith and the Devil as collected by Father Joximiel Barandiaran. It tells the story of a blacksmith who holds a demon in captivity and as revenge for his troubles is torturing it. Later, an orphan girl releases the demon from its enclosure. Okay, so I really love this film. The costume and makeup work for the demon and other demons was amazing. It reminds me of things we see in a Del Toro film. They really embrace the stereotypical look of the devil, but in this fantastical way where you're in awe of it. The depiction of hell and demons of different rankings was actually really enjoyable. I think what I love most is we're shown humans side by side with demons, and yet it's the humans who act cruel and depraved and violent, and the demons are literally just standing or sitting there. They don't have to do anything. They let humans condemn themselves and just wait to collect. Humans in this tale are so mean and cruel. It results in a little girl selling her soul just so she can be with her mother again and away from the people who treat her so cruelly. I love this girl. Aside from an amazing performance, she is a great character to follow. For someone so young, she doesn't take crap from anyone, and she's always giving a big screw you to those who try to scare her into religion. Just an overall amazing film, and I love the illustrated story opening. Number 53, Evils of the Night, a 1985 science fiction horror film directed by Marty Russman and written by Russman and Philip Dennis Connors. Space vampires recruit two sadistic garage mechanics to abduct teenagers living in a college town and bring them to a rural hospital. There, the aliens drain them of their blood, which they need to stay young and save their dying planet. You know those movies about acting legends who in their older years are forced to take on the worst kind of roles in films because they can't get anything else? Yeah, well, this is an example of when that happens. I mean, Neville Brand, Julie Newmar, and John Carradine, these aren't acting slouches. I just watched John Carradine in Dracula. I just watched Neville Brand in Eaten Alive. Clearly the decline of his career, and now I'm watching them in this. The so-called space vampires are barely in this film. 60% of this film is about bad sex scenes and tits and awful dialogue and weak performances. Seriously, it's one thing to have bad sex scenes, but when the guys all still have their pants on and the women are moaning, that's a reach. What are these magical dicks that penetrate pants? The next 35% of the film is entirely putting the sadistic, dumb garage mechanics as the central villains and pulling focus, and the remaining 5% is space vampires who don't really do anything except wear ridiculous outfits. I mean, this was like an 80s Barbarella kind of movie. 1985 must have been the year for space vampires because Evils of the Night and Life Force came out the same year, both about space vampires, and while both were commercial and critical failures, I can tell you, Life Force was a million times better in every way. Neville Brand actually tries to give a performance, but it's the same performance as Eaten Alive, and well, sadly, John Carradine is stiffly delivering lines, and Julie Newmar is just phoning it in the entire time. I'd say it was the cosmetic work making her expression hard to read, but no, she just really could care less, and I don't blame her. Number 54, Exists, a 2014 American found footage monster horror film directed by Eduardo Sanchez and written by Jamie Nash. The story revolves around a group of friends hunted by something in the woods of East Texas. It's stuff like this that makes me hate found footage films. Why? Because it's an entire film where one single person doesn't do anything except point a fucking camera in people's faces. Oh, everyone's barricading the house? Let me sit on my ass and record instead of help. Oh, everyone is sitting and crying because someone is dead? Let me go around and record everyone's faces. Oh, something is literally breaking in and is about to kill us? Yeah, I should definitely record that instead of defending myself or help my friends. Running through the woods? Yep, I'm gonna record that too. Oh, I was in a terrible crash and my brother and friends are fucking dying? Nah, why try to help them? I should pick up my camera and keep fucking recording. Whoa, I was kidnapped by Bigfoot and it gave me my camera back? I should pick it up and record this confrontation instead of running the fuck away. This shit is why I hate the genre. Because one character is the designated camera person and not a single thing they do holds any basis in reality. It's not really found footage. It's just an on-screen cameraman scripted what to do with the camera and not allowed to put it down. That's not real found footage, because if it was real, that fucking camera would have been dumped ages ago and you'd be running for your fucking life. Even in this day and age, you drop that shit and protect yourself, because spending your time recording attacks instead of trying not to die makes no fucking sense. If that's what they wanted to do, they could have just gone with body cams. That would make more sense, because you'd be so in the moment you'd forget it was even there, but nope, hell, security cameras, something. Lucky for them, they used GoPro, so the quality is better than most found footage films, but the use of the camera is 100% worse. Probably one of the worst found footage films in terms of how they utilize the camera, as in they never fucking stop. They treat the film like it's a film with a cameraman instead of treating it like people living in the moment. The costume for Bigfoot looks fake as hell, but the facial makeup and prosthetics actually looks really good, surprisingly. Performances are good, but this film has made Bigfoot a very human character. It's not acting as a predator or animal instinct. They accidentally hit its child with the car in the dark, and so it wants revenge and is hunting them down one by one. Really, guys? A found footage Bigfoot revenge story? I fucking can't. Number 55, XD, a 2007 Japanese horror film directed by Sion Sono and written by Sono and Masaki Adachi. The plot involves an aspiring hairdresser who becomes the infatuation of a trichophilic man who sells hair extensions to nearby hair salons. The source of the hair is the stolen corpse of a girl whose dead body continues to grow beautiful and voluminous black hair that comes alive, driving those who use the extensions insane or killing them. Ah, good old Japan, coming through with the fucked up shit as always. I mean, this film had me gagging, and not in a good way. I'm now grossed out by hair. You know, the stuff on my own head. Now the thought of hair makes me want to be sick. I've seen lots of Japanese horror, and sometimes there's a lot of messed up stuff going on, but not much plot or story to explain or justify the fucked up parts. This is different. There's actually a story. The film takes time letting us get to know our characters, giving us a chance to have sympathy and compassion for some and disdain for others. We see their evolution and the film has an actual conclusion. It's a weird subject and I'll never listen to Silent Night the same way ever again, but with that said, as weird as this film is, I actually kind of enjoyed it. Number 56, Eyes Without a Face, better known as Les Yeux Sans Visage, a 1960 French horror film directed by Georges Franjou from a screenplay by Franjou, Jean Redon, Pierre Beaulieu, Thomas Narcejac, and Claude Sautier, based on the novel of the same name by Jean Redon. The film follows a plastic surgeon who is determined to perform a face transplant on his daughter who was disfigured in an auto crash. It's not an unfamiliar story of an obsessed doctor, but the way it's filmed has a softness to it that separates it from other films of that nature, though I don't feel his motivations are entirely clear. Is he so determined to giving his daughter a new face to the point he goes against ethical practices and breaks the law because he feels guilt for having caused his child disfigurement, or is he determined because he is so sure of himself and his work that he cannot accept failure as an option? Is it about him or her? While he treats her with kindness for the most part, he is a controlling and dominating force in her life, not wishing for people to see her face, not even wanting her to see her own face. He is forcing a beauty standard upon her instead of accepting her or helping her live her life. The constant surgeries are slowly destroying her mentally and emotionally. She's cut off from the world, a prisoner in her own home, and a prisoner to a face she's not even allowed to see. Her father's secretary treats her like a daughter, but she follows the doctor's orders and whims blindlessly, feeling indebted to him for restoring her own beauty, believing that because he gave her what she wanted, it must be what Christiane wants too. No one ever stops to listen to her to find out what she wants. The horror isn't in the surgeries or deaths, it's in the treatment of Christiane and how she is forced to see all this behavior as normalcy until eventually she can't take it anymore and decides instead of ending her own life, she'll choose a different kind of freedom, showing she has more strength and willpower than any other character. The mask she is forced to wear is disturbing in its lack of emotion and expression, and yet that speaks volumes. The mask itself, I feel, is a great representation of what physical beauty is and what it means. Something vain, lifeless, and emotionless, and detached from the self. Point I'm making is, I really like this film. Number 57, The Fourth Kind, a 2009 American science fiction psychological thriller film directed by Olatunde Osunsanmi, with a screenplay by Osunsanmi from a story by Osunsanmi and Terry Lee Robbins. Please don't make me say that name again. The film is a pseudo-documentary purporting to be based on real events occurring in Nome, Alaska in 2000, in which psychologist Dr. Abigail Emily Tyler uses hypnosis to uncover memories of alien abduction from her patients and finds evidence suggesting that she may have been abducted as well. I know one of the main complaints about this film is people were offended that the film turned the real-life tragedies of people in Nome, Alaska and made a story about alien abduction to explain them. I have to agree with those sentiments. I've seen films made that talk about disappearances or missing persons in specific places where they focus more on the families dealing with it or the police investigating it, and more going into the emotional and psychological struggle of these cases. But to take real-life missing persons reports and slap a ridiculous story about aliens over them, I think is, as people say, offensive. People have lost loved ones. I don't think it's appropriate or fair to those people. The film should have either set the story in a fictional town or just in a completely different country that doesn't have real missing persons issues of this nature. It's a film within a film, but for productions that have done this, I have to say that American Horror Story Roanoke did it far better. I think the performances are great. Mila Jovovich gives some amazing screams, but Charlotte Milchard was giving some very unrealistic, unnatural screams. You couldn't get that sense of fear or primal terror in them when she screamed. It felt like bad acting in those moments. We have the cliche brood of a cop who is overly aggressive for no reason and won't listen to reason. We have characters who have recorded evidence of things happening and yet not once use this evidence to clear their names, so apparently they're all stupid. A cop sees a UFO and apparently that still doesn't mean anything. And then to make matters worse, they write the main character as being proven to have a psychotic break and that she was wrong about the death of her husband. He wasn't murdered or anything like that, he really committed suicide. So this moment discredits all of the main character's other moments and makes me wonder what was the point. The story caves in on itself too much and there's something weird about aliens declaring themselves as God. Either way, yeah, this isn't a great film. Number 58, From Dusk Till Dawn, a 1996 American action horror film directed by Robert Rodriguez with a screenplay by Quentin Tarantino from a story by Robert Kurtzman. In it, two criminals and their hostages unknowingly seek temporary refuge in a truck stop populated by vampires with chaotic results. Is it weird that this film feels like a comfort flick to me? Despite the blood and action and vampires and a sexual predator, it's a very relaxing watch. I don't know what that says about me, but whatever. George Clooney is so much fun to watch in this film. If he was in every film, I'd be happy with that. I was never quite sold on Richie's character. I mean, he's obviously a sexual predator and a murderer, but he's very clearly got some undiagnosed mental disorder, considering he hallucinates. And yet there's this one scene to establish this aspect to his character, and then at the end of the day, he's more or less a throwaway, so it seemed pointless to even include that moment. My favourite shot of the entire film is actually the final shot where you realise the titty twister is actually just the top of an ancient Aztec temple, the base of which is filled with the remnants of all the years of victims of vampires had lured and slaughtered. That one shot said so much and I love that. I don't forgive Rat Vampire though. Number 59, From Dusk Till Dawn 2, Texas Blood Money, a 1999 American Western horror film directed by Scott Spiegel with a screenplay by Spiegel and Dwayne Whitaker from a story by Spiegel and Bose Yakin. It's the second film in the From Dusk Till Dawn series and a sequel to From Dusk Till Dawn. In it, 5 career criminals gather in Mexico to pull off a bank heist. They soon realize that they are up against far more frightening creatures than the police pursuing them. This was unnecessary. The vampires are different, they're also more lame, and I don't know how Danny Trejo's character came back from the dead undead. I mean, vampires robbing a bank? As crappy as that is, I don't understand why that couldn't be its own story. Why did it have to be a sequel to From Dusk Till Dawn? The opening scene had no place in this film whatsoever, and I had to spend way too long listening to the sounds of sex being the background noise for this movie. And from the sounds of it, it was bad 70s, 80s porn sounds too. This didn't have the fun quality of the first film, it didn't have the flair of the first film, it had no interesting characters at all. I don't go into a vampire movie expecting 4 guys to argue over the merits of story-based porn versus non-story-based porn. I mean, Jesus Christ. Though I'm on the side of story-based porn being superior, but that's just me. Thoroughly bored by this film, just wasn't necessary and a waste of time and studio funding. And number 60, finally we're there, From Dusk Till Dawn 3, The Hangman's Daughter, a 1999 American Western horror film directed by P.J. Pesci with a screenplay by Alvaro Rodriguez from a story by Alvaro Rodriguez and Robert Rodriguez, and is a prequel to 1996's From Dusk Till Dawn. Set 100 years ago in Mexico, this horror western is the story of the birth of vampire princess Santanico Pandemonium. I was fully prepared to hate this, but I actually kind of enjoyed it. The fact it's a prequel and not a sequel helps a lot, at least in this it makes sense for Danny Trejo to be in it, though it does make you feel bad for the vampires. Hundreds or thousands of years they've been around and they all get massacred by a couple of bikers, a thief, a sexual predator, and a religious family. I mean, that's a rough gig. I like that we see a different incarnation of the Titty Twister bar, where now it's a saloon and a brothel, which is cool. As cheesy as it is, I even love that it ends with the exact same shot as the first film, only difference is we see abandoned wagons instead of cars, and the pit is less empty, so it shows you an evolution of their dumping ground, which is cool. I kind of love that this film gives more love and attention to Santanico Pandemonium. She was a cool character that was killed off before getting a chance to shine in the original film, so So I enjoyed how this was her origin story, and thank God they actually cast a Mexican to play her. Whereas her love interest, who is meant to be Mexican, is played by an Australian Italian, and her father is played by a freaking Maori. Good old Hollywood, any tan person will do. Either way, I had a fun time with this, and I love seeing more of this ancient Aztec temple. Another recap down, and my vocal cords have gone to shit again. Oh my god, I am exhausted. I'm also freezing, and I don't have much of a voice right now. I don't know if you can hear, but my voice is very croaky now because I go from watching all these movies and I'm not really talking to anyone to having to sit down and try to record all this, and there are so many foreign names and big words, and it takes me like several goes to try and get them right, and I don't even think I actually do. But anyway, that is besides the point. If you have seen any of the films that I have recapped today, please comment down below and share your thoughts on them. If there are films that I have watched that you haven't heard of or haven't seen and they have piqued your interest, please comment down below and tell me what those are. And if you have any questions, by all means ask. I will be happy to answer them as best as I can, but I am off. I now have to go and continue with my marathon so I can give you recap number 3, which I can already tell you is probably going to be very long, because like longer than this maybe, because I have one rant in that and one really lengthy review of another film, because I have so much in it that I want to praise. I shouldn't have put it on this list, but I didn't expect to like it so much. It really deserved its own individual review, but oh well. Can't change that now. I hope everybody is having a happy October. Thank you as always to my amazing patrons for the continued support. I am off to go watch those movies that I mentioned. So until next time guys, bye.